If you're watching this right now, stop whatever else you're doing and listen, because what I'm about to tell you is the one thing nobody warns you about, the one truth that could save you years of stress, wasted energy, and emotional exhaustion. And once you hear it, you will never look at people the same way again. You're about to understand why certain individuals drain you, why certain relationships feel like walking on broken glass, and why no matter how much you give, some people still find a way to take more. This is the moment everything becomes clear. There's a reason toxic people keep showing up in your life, and it's not because you're weak, or too kind, or too forgiving. It's because nobody ever taught you the one skill that instantly exposes manipulation, destroys their power, and protects your peace without you having to fight, argue, or explain a single thing. Today I'm going to give you that skill, not in theory, not in vague inspirational quotes, but in a way you can actually use the second this video ends. And I promise you this: once you hear it, toxic people will never look at you the same again. They won't know how to approach you. They won't know how to get under your skin. They won't know how to pull you into their chaos. You'll see the tactics. You'll recognize the patterns. You'll feel their influence fading before they even realize what happened. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming untouchable in the best possible way. It's about stepping into a version of yourself that doesn't need to shout to be heard, doesn't need to fight to be respected, and doesn't need to suffer to keep the peace. If you're ready for the moment everything changes, keep watching. This is where your power starts. When you stop explaining yourself, something profound happens, not to them but to you. Most people don't realize how much of their life is spent trying to manage the perceptions of others. You explain your choices because you want to be understood. You explain your feelings because you want to be accepted. You explain your boundaries because you hope someone will respect them. And on the surface, that seems reasonable. But here's the psychological trap: toxic people don't listen to understand. They listen to maintain control. The moment you start explaining, you enter their arena, an arena they built, where the rules are designed so that you always lose. Toxic people thrive on confusion. The more you try to justify your decisions, the more angles they find to twist your words, poke holes in your reasoning, or question your motives. They don't want clarity. They want loopholes. They want you caught in a cycle where you're constantly proving yourself, constantly defending yourself, constantly seeking their approval. Because as long as you're explaining, you're not acting, you're reacting. And reaction is exactly what they feed on. But the deeper truth is this: you don't actually explain yourself for them. You do it because on some level, you're tied to the illusion that other people's acceptance has some final authority over your worth. If you peel it back, explanation becomes a subtle form of asking permission. You're trying to show why you're valid, why your feelings are reasonable, why your choices make sense. And if someone toxic decides your explanation isn't good enough, suddenly you question yourself. You start shrinking, you start doubting, you start bending your life around opinions that were never stable to begin with. So the moment you stop explaining, everything shifts. You're no longer performing. You're no longer handing out emotional reports, hoping for a passing grade. You're reclaiming the seat of authority in your own life. Silence, in this case, isn't avoidance, it's clarity. It's the decision to step out of their arena entirely and stand on solid ground. It tells the other person, I know my reasons, I know my boundaries, I know my direction, I don't need you to validate any of it. And here's the part most people underestimate: truly balanced, emotionally healthy individuals don't need elaborate explanations from you. They recognize that every person is responsible for their own decisions. They respect boundaries without requiring a dissertation. It's only the insecure, the manipulative, or the ego-driven who demand that you constantly justify yourself. So when you stop explaining, you're not being rude, you're filtering. You're revealing who is capable of meeting you at your level, and who only wanted access to your vulnerability so they could weaponize it. There's also a philosophical depth to holding your ground without explanation. It means you've accepted that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Your mind, your peace, your emotional space, all of that is private property, and private property doesn't require permission slips. Once you internalize that, the behavior of toxic people becomes predictable, almost irrelevant. They lose interest because there's nothing left to grab onto. You're no longer feeding the dynamic. You're no longer the predictable emotional supply they used to rely on. And something else happens too. You gain time. The energy you used to spend crafting explanations, debating your perspective, replaying conversations, defending your intention, you get all of that back. That mental bandwidth becomes yours again. Your focus becomes sharper. Your confidence becomes quieter but stronger. Your boundaries become effortless instead of exhausting. So the real power in not explaining yourself isn't about shutting others out. It's about letting yourself in, letting your decisions belong to you, letting your peace guide you instead of someone else's expectations. Remember this: you don't owe an explanation for choosing your own well-being. Let your clarity speak louder than your words. There's a point in your growth where silence stops feeling like something forced and starts feeling like something earned. Most people misunderstand silence because they think it means surrender. They assume staying quiet implies you don't have a defense, you don't have strength, or you don't have anything to say. But the truth is, silence becomes powerful when it's intentional, when it comes from a place of clarity instead of fear. Toxic people can't read that kind of silence. They only understand noise, conflict, and emotional reaction. So when you stop giving them that, their entire strategy collapses. Silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is communication without permission. It says, I'm no longer available for this level of interaction. Toxic people expect you to argue. They expect you to over-explain, defend, plead, or negotiate. They expect you to be emotionally accessible, because your emotional access is their leverage. They rely on your responses to measure their control. So when you choose silence, you're disrupting a pattern they depend on. You're stepping out of the dynamic completely, and that frustrates them because now they can't predict you, influence you, or pull you into their emotional chaos. It's important to understand the psychology behind why silence works. Human behavior is fueled by reward, whether emotional or psychological. Toxic individuals don't necessarily think consciously about it, but they seek the reward of reaction, the spike, the argument, the validation that they can still affect you. When you remain calm and silent, you remove the reward. Without that, there's nothing for them to hold on to. And people, even toxic ones, don't stay committed to situations where they gain nothing. Silence starves the dynamic. But your silence also reveals something deeper. It shows you've reached a point where you no longer need someone else to recognize your boundary in order for it to exist. That's maturity. That's emotional intelligence. Boundaries become effortless when you stop treating them like requests and start treating them like decisions. Silence is the expression of that decision. You don't argue for your limit, you embody it. And in that embodiment, something shifts inside you. You feel a stronger sense of internal stability because you're not constantly performing emotional explanations. You're not waiting for someone to approve of your boundary. You're grounded in your own expectation of self-respect. When you exercise silence, you're choosing a response aligned with your values instead of their behavior. That's where the power comes from, not from the quiet itself, but from the alignment behind it. The philosophical depth of silence is that it places you firmly in the present moment. Arguments drag you into the past. Defensiveness throws you into hypothetical futures, but silence roots you in who you are right now, the person who has nothing to prove. Toxic interactions drain energy because they're designed to pull you out of yourself. Silence returns you to yourself. It turns the conversation inward instead of outward. It becomes less about what they did and more about how you choose to show up in your own life. People sometimes fear silence because it feels like disconnection, but sometimes disconnection is exactly what you need. You're not disconnecting from humanity, you're disconnecting from dysfunction. You're choosing not to participate in your own emotional depletion. Healthy people don't interpret your silence as aggression. They interpret it as space. Toxic people interpret it as a threat, because for the first time, you're not playing the role they assigned you. And maybe the most empowering part is this: when you choose silence, you're not trying to change the other person. You're changing your relationship to the situation. Toxic people lose their influence not because they changed, but because you did. You stopped feeding the conflict. You stopped giving away your emotional currency. You stopped opening the door. Silence is your boundary becoming real, And when you learn to hold that silence with confidence, the world around you changes, because the people who can't function without your reaction will eventually stop knocking. Let your silence speak the respect you have for yourself. There comes a moment when you realize that peace and approval are rarely found in the same room. Most people spend a large part of their lives trying to balance both, trying to maintain their inner calm while still earning the approval of people who don't have the capacity to honor it. But when you decide, clearly and without apology, that your peace matters more than how anyone interprets it, you step into a different level of emotional maturity. You stop negotiating with people who benefit from your instability. You stop shrinking your needs to fit someone else's comfort. And you begin to understand that approval is a moving target, but peace is a choice you can make every single day. Choosing peace over approval does not mean isolating yourself or shutting down emotionally. It means taking responsibility for the environment you allow around you. Toxic people rely on your desire to be liked, understood, or accepted. They know that if you care enough about their opinion, they can manipulate your behavior. They can guilt you, shame you, or pressure you into tolerating things that drain you. But when you choose peace, you're no longer operating from fear